Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a quick process video for you. This is day 5 of Hints and Whispers from Bythewell4God. I am working in my interleaved Bible this month, and I'm just going to do a quick page. I started with this paper that I had created. This was the digital paper that Bythewell4God has that you can buy that coordinate with the kit. And I printed that on clear sticker paper, and then I layered that over some vintage book text, and it was in a foreign language. I think it was German or something, and so that's what I'm going to use for my page today. But I want to start with just a little bit of a background here. So I'm using distress crayons in a few different colors. I started out just kind of scribbling it onto the Bible paper, and then I wanted a little bit more saturation of color, so I'm going to end up just kind of using the baby wipe and coloring right onto the baby wipe and then adding that around the edges. So I started with Tattered Rose, and then I added just a little bit of Victorian Velvet just to kind of deepen that color. And now I'm going to go around the edges of that. And then I will also use just a little bit of aged mahogany. And I'm just kind of going back and forth between these colors, trying to get the look that I'm after here. You can kind of see I'm putting some of that darker color down. This is the Victorian Velvet. I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm making sure to kind of blend that out pretty well. And then I'm going to come back in with the aged mahogany. That's the color you kind of see here. And then I'm going to go back in with that lightest color, which was the Tattered Rose, kind of in the center, and sort of blend everything out together. Here you can see I'm just scribbling it on there. I love this technique with distress crayons. It's super simple way to get some color in your background, and it's easy and quick. And you can do it either way, you can see me doing here with blending it, like scribbling on there, or you can just use it applying it with the baby wipe. So I wanted to trim down this paper just a little bit because I wanted it to have not so perfect of an edge. It was really straight edged. So I used my decal trimmer from Tim Holtz to do that. And then I decided that my background needed a little bit more interest. So I'm using this stencil. This is the Momentary Affliction stencil. I think this is an old one from Bythewell4God, and whatever ink was just left over on my little blendy brush, just to add a little bit of visual texture kind of to the background in a few areas. Most of this page is going to get covered up, so I'm not super worried about it, but it does help just to have a little bit of added interest. And I am gluing this paper down upside down, so all of the words are upside down, because when you do it that way, your eye kind of just reads it as a texture instead of reading it as like you're trying to figure out what these words are. So that's just a hint for you if you ever are working with like book text or something and you don't want it to kind of draw your attention. If you flip it to the side or flip it upside down, it starts to read more like a texture, if that makes sense. So I went through my die cuts, and I saved you from the going back and forth of that, but I ended up on the tree. For some reason, I had a really hard time with this page. It's a pretty simple page, but it just took me a long time to get it the way that I had it in my head. So I decided I needed a little bit of extra interest in the background to kind of pop that page up off of the background, because the colors were very similar. So I pulled out some vintage ledger paper. This is from my subscription to a house of books, and I used it because it's got that pink, the pink lines in there, and I love all of that handwriting as well. I just liked all the interest from that. So that's just kind of tucked behind there. And then I also pulled out this was a ginormous paper doily. This is obviously just like a fourth of it, so you can imagine how big it was. But I want to use it on this page. I just have to figure out how. I thought about putting it over, but then it was just kind of taking up too much visual weight, if that makes sense. And so I decided to actually layer it in between those two pieces of paper. And I like that much better. It's just kind of peeking out from the background, but it's enough that it just kind of softens some of the edges just a little bit. And I have these 3 pieces kind of the way that I want them. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue just to hold everything together while I'm working on getting everything else the way that I want it. I cut a lot of this video out because I was just going back and forth. I just really struggled with this page. And in the end, it's a really simple page, but it sometimes, I don't know, I couldn't get it to look the way that I had it in my mind. So I just kept working at it and adding layers and things. So I'm kind of working. I want to leave myself the opportunity, if I want to, be able to layer things still on here. So it's not glued down permanently just yet, because at this point I still don't know what I'm wanting to do. I know I want to use this tree, and so I decided to just go ahead and glue this section down, and then I trimmed off the edge of that doily. And I know I want to use that tree down in the bottom corner, but I felt like it needed something else, and I want that tree kind of hanging off the text, you know, the pattern paper, and hanging over onto the doily to kind of ground everything together. And so I added some ledger paper back behind there. This is just the top section of the part that I tore off, just to give some height to that tree. And also kind of bridge that gap between the pattern paper and the doily and the edge of the Bible page. And then I added this piece of trim lace. This is just from Hobby Lobby, down across the bottom. I used some Fabri-Tac for that, but the rest I'm using my art glitter glue. And then I just needed to add a little bit more kind of around these edges where I hadn't glued it down perfectly. I had just kind of tacked it down. And then I'm going to add this tree just overlapping the lace just ever so slightly. But I wanted to kind of soften the edges between all of those kind of square shaped papers, if that makes sense. So once I have that done, I feel like I need some balance up in the top left-hand corner. So I pulled out the flashcard for the scripture, which I'm working in 2 Corinthians. And then I backed that with some pink paper. This is the pattern paper that came with the kit, and I decided to just kind of rough up the edges. I could have used my decal trimmer, but I just hadn't thought of it at that point, so I just used my fingernails to rough that up, and then I distressed that. For all of those, I did use archival ink in ground espresso, and then I added just a little tiny bit of lace. It barely peeks out behind this flashcard, but it's just enough to kind of soften the edges. And then I'm going to glue this down so that it's kind of overlapping one, like the center piece that's like the printed paper, but not overlapping the ledger, if that makes sense. Just to kind of it just pulls everything together when you have them in, you know, your different layers overlapping like that. I needed a little bit of extra glue here. I did use the crayon over on the left side to mark the verse, and then I used my water brush to dissolve the pigment over there. And then I will add that this is day 5 using the tile alphas down there in the bottom left of that page, and that will pretty much do it for me. So if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and until next time, bye.